My name is Grace Whitfield. I'm 28, and the last thing my mother ever called me in public was a defect. She said it at my sister's wedding, in a stone ballroom with 200 guests, while I stood holding a glass of champagne I never asked for. 9 years of silence, and that was her opening line. Welcome back to the channel, where quiet women finally tell the stories their families hoped would stay buried. If you've ever been made to feel like the smallest person at your own family's table, this one is for you. But this story doesn't start in that ballroom. It starts 10 years earlier, at a country club, under a wall of framed diplomas that held one empty frame. In my parents' house there is a wall, 11 frames, 3 generations of Dixons in mahogany and glass. My grandfather's medical degree, my mother's cardiology certification, my father's fellowship. Sunday dinners had a liturgy. My mother asked each of us what we'd achieved that week, and the answers were graded like lab results. My sister Vivian, 4 years older, always had numbers ready, class rank, test scores. I was the other kind of child. I could splint a bird's wing better than the visiting nurse, but I froze in academic competitions. My mother never screamed. Screaming was for families without standards. She simply adjusted her attention downward, the way you'd rebalance a portfolio. The summer I turned 14, a 12th frame appeared on the wall, empty. My mother said it was mine, pending. The night I graduated high school, my mother booked the country club's garden room. Between the salad and the entree, she stood and announced Vivian's acceptance to medical school. The whole table rose. Then she tapped her glass again. And of course, we should say something about Grace. Every face turned. One daughter got the dean's mind, she said, tilting her glass toward Vivian. Then the pause. Her scalpel. The other got well. We celebrate what there is to celebrate. Later, when the family photos went up on the mantle, I wasn't in the group shot. Not cropped out, composed out. When I asked my mother about it, she walked me to the wall and tapped the empty frame. In this family, love is earned. This frame is waiting. I told her it could wait forever, because I wasn't going to medical school. Something behind her eyes closed like a till. Then it will hang empty, she said, and everyone who visits will know why. That night, my grandmother Ruth found me on the porch swing. She'd been a nurse for 40 years, night shifts and wound care, married to the man who started that wall. She unbuckled her old steel nurse's watch and clasped it onto my wrist. This has seen more people through the worst night of their lives than everyone at that dinner combined, she said, and it never once asked anyone their class rank. Then, nobody earns love, honey. She stopped there. I wouldn't hear the rest of that sentence for 10 more years. 10 months later, they threw me out. My college fund, $80,000, was reallocated to Vivian's education. An investment goes where the return is, my mother said from the doorway, like she was reading a weather report. The ultimatum came on a Tuesday: quit my nursing assistant work, resume the family trajectory, or leave. I packed in 40 minutes. At the door, my mother said, "You're choosing to be nobody." I said, "I'm choosing to be somebody you don't get to grade." The porch light went off before I reached the sidewalk. I spent my 20s building something from nothing. My first client was a retired machinist who couldn't button his own shirt. I learned to shave a face that flinched, to hold a man's dignity in my 2 hands for 8 hours a night and never drop it. I slept above a laundromat and kept a notebook of everything my employer did wrong. When my grandmother had a stroke, I found out 2 days late from a neighbor. Nobody in my family called me. I drove 2.5 hours to the hospice and was told, politely, that I wasn't on the visitor list. Immediate family only. 11 days later, she died. I learned about the funeral after it was over. A week before her stroke, Ruth had left me a voicemail, 41 seconds. I played it the night I learned she was gone. Got 12 seconds in. "Gracie, it's your grandmother. Don't you dare delete this." And my thumb hit stop like a reflex. I kept that voicemail 5 years and never once let it finish. 6 months after we lost her, I took $12,000 and rented a 2-room office. I named the company Brightwater. I just wanted something that sounded like the opposite of a hallway full of frames. My hiring policy was 1 sentence: hire the ones who show up. 5 years later, Brightwater had over 300 caregivers across 3 states, and I had a title I still can't say without hearing my younger self laugh: founder and president. A hospital surgeon called one Tuesday about a patient nobody else would take. He expected a sales rep. What walked in was a founder who'd personally done every job on the care plan. Dr. Daniel Whitfield noticed the nurse's watch and asked whose it had been. Nobody in 8 years had asked that. We married when I was 26, 30 guests, his mother's backyard. 2 weeks before, I mailed my parents an invitation anyway. It came back 13 days later, opened, read, resealed in my mother's handwriting, with one line on the back in blue ink. Don't embarrass yourself. I kept it in a cedar box. Every December after, I still mailed a plain Christmas card, signed, Grace. Never answered. Some part of me was still standing at the bottom of that wall, waiting for someone to hang something in the frame. 2 years ago, the hospital asked me to sponsor a geriatric fellowship. I agreed on one condition: it would be named the Ruth Chase Fellowship, after a nurse who worked 40 years of nights and never got a frame of her own, and my name would appear nowhere. The first fellow selected that spring was a young internist named Eric Holston. I funded a stranger's future and told no one. This spring, that stranger sent me a wedding invitation because he was marrying my sister. Which brings us to the ballroom. My mother found me on the terrace. Why is this defect here? Low, precise, meant only for the sterile field. Vivian arrived seconds later in a cloud of tulle and panic. "You are not invited," she hissed. My father, when I found him, said only, "Use the kitchen door. Don't make your mother repeat herself." 9 years, and that was the whole of it. I finally understood his silence had never been a hostage's silence. It was a shareholder's. He'd simply let her read the minutes. Through the ceremony, my professional instincts, the ones trained to audit a care plan for what's missing, started itemizing the wedding. Vivian, supposedly a dermatologist with a fall grand opening, couldn't produce a single colleague, a neighborhood, or a direct answer to a medical question without my mother materializing to answer for her. A pattern that tight meant something was bleeding under the gown. At the reception, our table card read, Dr. and Mrs. Whitfield, Table 2. Groom's side, honored guests. I watched my mother read the seating chart and, for half a second, lose control of her own face. She didn't know who Whitfield was. Vivian found the card next and went the color of the tablecloth. The groom's mother, Dr. Susan Holston, chief of medicine, came over first, warm and sharp-eyed. "So how do you know our Vivian?" I had one honest sentence loaded and chose the smallest true one instead. "We grew up in the same town." She filed something away and moved on. Vivian cornered me by the coat check, panic under the bridal smile. "Whatever you told her, walk it back." I asked what story she'd told the Holstons about me. "There is no story," she said. "You don't exist. As far as they know, I'm an only child. Not a cover story. An absence. I hadn't been buried. They'd never dug the hole." But her hands were shaking, hospice clipboard shaking, and her eyes kept flicking not toward our mother, but toward Eric. That's the shake of someone defending a lie stacked on top of another lie. I nearly left. Daniel offered to get the car, then Ruth's watch caught on my sleeve, and I thought about a woman who walked through that family's front door for 6 decades in a nurse's cardigan and never once used the service entrance. "We're staying for the toasts," I said. My mother rose first, glass in hand, the performance of a career, 2 great medical families joining, standards upheld across generations. "Everything in this family is earned," she told the room. "Nothing is given away free at our table." I heard the sentence underneath the sentence. She wasn't quoting herself. She was reciting something said to her by a grandfather with a ledger where his lap should have been. Then Eric stood. He thanked his mentor, Dr. Daniel Whitfield, Table 2. Every Dixon head turned. Then he said he also wanted to thank the woman who'd funded the fellowship that trained him, a founder who wouldn't let the hospital print her name. It took me 2 years and one indiscreet colleague to find out who she was. Grace Whitfield. Would you stand? Ruth Chase was her grandmother. The applause started warm and confused. My mother rose too. not to clap. Her face had gone the gray of old snow. "There's been a mix-up," she said. Hostess laugh bolted on top. "Grace is a distant relation." And Vivian, 9 years of message discipline gone in one blurt, said into the open microphone, "You are not invited." Eric turned to his bride slowly. "Not invited? I invited her. This is my mentor's wife. Her grandmother's name is on my diploma wall." His voice didn't rise. It clarified. "Do you have any idea who this woman is?" My mother reached for rank. "Eric, dear, this is a family matter." "Which family?" he said quietly. Susan Holston finished it, rising without hurry. "Vivian, you told us you were an only child." Nobody answered. That was the answer. My mother crossed the frozen room and took my arm with both hands, calibrated to reach the first 3 rows. "Grace, darling, we'll discuss family matters privately." Darling. After 9 years and a returned envelope, I'd graduated to darling the moment there were witnesses. I lifted her hands off my arm the way I used to lift my first clients, firmly, without negotiation, and told Susan I needed some air. My mother followed me into the corridor and, for the first time in 9 years, dropped the performance entirely. No audience left to perform for. "Here's what happens now," she said. "You come home. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Sunday dinners, the frame gets filled. You finally earned your place." Her hands were trembling, the tremor that had ended her surgical career, the one she'd hidden under crossed arms all night. For one sentence, something old cracked open. "My father made me recite my class rank at that table every Sunday until I left for college," she said. "I gave you a family that keeps score, because it's the only kind I was ever given, and it worked. Look at Vivian. We both heard it land over a ballroom where her marriage was currently on fire." Susan Holston asked me straight, in front of everyone, "Grace, is it true? Were you part of this family?" My mother's script radiated off her shoulder. "Always close, quiet, private." One sentence and the door stood open behind me with every holiday inside it. Instead, I heard Ruth on the porch swing. "Nobody earns love, honey." And I finally understood. The goal was never to win the argument, it was to leave the courtroom. "I was born a Dixon," I said. "When I was 19, I was told that in this family, love is earned, and I stopped earning. I haven't spoken to them in 9 years. Eric, you married someone tonight. Ask her gently for the rest. It isn't mine to tell. I had everything. The shaking hands, the fabricated practice, all of it. And I left it hers to drop." Then I turned to my mother. "No. The frame stays empty. I built my own wall." I took Daniel's arm and walked out through the front doors, center aisle. Behind us, before they closed, a single champagne glass hit the floor. On the terrace, in the cold spring dark, I finally played that voicemail all the way through. 12 seconds in, my thumb stayed down. "I need you to hear this, honey, because nobody ever told your mother, so she never learned how to say it to you, and somebody in this family has to go first. Nobody earns love, honey. Love is the thing they can't bill you for. You were never the empty frame, Gracie. You were the whole wall and the house it holds up. Don't you dare wait for people with ledgers to tell you what you're worth. Come see me Sunday. Bring nothing." I cried once, in my husband's jacket, for the woman who'd gone first, and the 19-year-old who could have used those words sooner. Then I deleted my parents' address from my Christmas card list. The dynasty collapsed quietly over the next 6 weeks. The Holstons checked the chart. No lease, no license, no grand opening. Vivian's residency had ended halfway through her 2nd year. Not paused, ended. Eric filed for annulment, kindly, and kept the Ruth Chase Fellowship name on his email signature. My mother resigned her hospital gala chairmanship that fall, citing family obligations. Nobody fired her. Her currency had simply stopped clearing in every room that mattered to her. My father emailed me once, in November. One line, no subject. "Your grandmother would have been proud." I read it 30 times. I never answered. The wall still hangs in that house, 2.5 hours from my kitchen. 11 frames and 1 empty. Nobody took it down. Systems like that don't come down. They just lose jurisdiction. one escaped person at a time. 6 months later, on an ordinary Sunday, I looked down my own dinner table, Daniel arguing playoff brackets, my first caregivers, my late client's widow with her pie, and Eric Holston, still family somehow. On our own dining room wall hang 11 frames, a fiddle recital, a fishing boat, a coffee can, 2 backyard wedding photos, and a nurse in her cardigan on a porch swing, mid-sentence. Not one certificate. The watch stays on my wrist. And these days, I can play that voicemail all the way through while the potatoes boil. If a family ever made you audition for a seat at their table, hear this. Love that has to be earned was never love. It was a job with no wages. The table you build after will hold every person your old chairs never fit. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons or events is coincidental. Share this with someone who needs the reminder today, and I'll see you in the next one.